All right. I am here with Edward Valaitis, and he is the managing director and founder at Edison Avenue. How's it going, Edward?
It's going great.
Cool. I'm really excited to get into some tactical exit planning here. But before we get there, let's talk about your background. What got you into the space?
Kind of a unique path, I think. I spent 10 years working for Deutsche Bank in commercial banking. So I started out in commercial banking, and then I went to work for a large CPA firm. I became a partner in a CPA firm. And then I worked for a strategy and change management firm serving Fortune 2000 companies like Morgan Stanley and American Express, et cetera, helping them transform their organizations. And then after that, I decided to take that combination of skills, the strategic, the financial, the banking, and combine them to serve small to medium-sized companies.
Very nice. Very nice. So let's talk about kind of the sweet spot. Like what type of companies are you guys focusing on, and what's the main focus?
Yeah, well, we serve companies generally from valued at 1 to 25 million and a variety of industries. So everything from tool and die manufacturing to professional services like CPA firms to IT managed service companies that we've represented.
Nice. Very nice. And I think one of the things when it comes to making a plan, let's start there. Like, what are some of the components that go into like a bulletproof exit plan when people are approaching you and they're starting to get prepared?
Ideally, the ideal environment is 3 years before you plan on exiting to start preparing, so you have time if there are any major flaws or any major issues that are uncovered. Um, and really, one of the very first steps is doing a business valuation. So let's first figure out what your company is actually worth. And in the process, we do more than a business valuation. It's a business valuation, but it's also, we provide a list of recommendations on areas that need to be fixed or improved. Given my extensive operational experience, we'll look at situations and what do your employee contracts look like? What do your customer contracts look like? How's your inventory? Is there opportunities for recurring revenue? So we look at it holistically. And so not only do you understand where the ground is today as to in terms of what it's worth at this moment, but also what you can do to improve it over the next couple of years. So when you're ready to exit, you've maximized the value.
Nice, nice. And when it comes to valuation, let's unpack that a little bit. Like you mentioned, recurring revenue. That's sort of most of the people I talk to are always after some sort of recurring revenue just to be able to show future potential. But let's talk about how you're seeing valuations go on right now with everything in the market.
Um, Interest rates, the increases in the last year or so have certainly had an impact on on the valuations in terms of depressing them a bit, and also the uncertainty over the last several years economically with the inflation, etc. But I think as of this recent election, the anticipation, at least, of lower taxes, lower regulation, is putting some renewed optimism in the marketplace right now.
Hmm. Nice. And let's talk about kind of increasing the value as you prepare. Like, what are some key things that people can do as they're getting their business prepared over that 3 year period you said, kind of ramping up
Mhm.
to it? What are some key drivers of value there?
I would start with cleaning up the financial statements and the tax returns, making sure everything is being reported. Still come across businesses that are fairly substantial, um, and you want to have everything reported in clean books. So if you have family members taking a salary that aren't actually working in the business, if you have some personal items that are personal benefit but of not real value or real expense to the business, maybe remove those in the last 2 or 3 years prior to selling, so the books are as clean as possible, because the more adjustments an acquirer has to make, the more skeptical they'll be about the integrity of your books, and is it really worth it, and can they trust the financial statements. And also clean up accounts receivable if you've got some aging going on, making sure that's clean. Same thing with inventory, dispose of or write off inventory in advance so that it's not an issue. So the cleaner your books look and the more accurately you can represent it, the more likely you'll get your full asking price, and the less likely you'll have some discounting going on from a buyer.
Hmm.
Also, long-term customer contracts. If you can extend contracts or have auto renew contracts, that's also to your advantage. So you certainly want to create that continuity with your customers as much as you can.
Got it. And I think it's good clearing the books, especially aging, accounts receivable. Great, great tip there. With the reality of valuations versus expectations, this is something that, I think everybody I talk to, including myself, struggle with. And I don't know if there's actually one answer as to how it could work, because on one side, as the seller, somebody out there that's operating a business is emotionally charged. They're emotionally attached to it. So therefore, it inflates that value to that person. And then there's the reality of where the market sort of prices you. So what are some things that, you've encountered with helping entrepreneurs kind of come to a reality there?
Yeah, that's always a difficult topic in that, we all have heard the story of a friend of a friend of a friend who won the lottery when they sold their company and received some crazy multiple, and all we want to do is replicate that. So when we do uh, the business valuations, we typically have two values. We have the financial buyer, which are 95% plus of buyers, and
Mm-hmm.
here's what a financial buyer will do the numbers, and it'll come out to this range as to what they'll pay for it. And then we also have strategic buyers and have a line for that, and they'll pay in this range for your company. And that would be a situations where you're an add-on, so you're vertically integrating with another company, and so we're going to remove a lot of expenses. It's going to add a lot of value to their business. The example I like to share sometimes is the dental supply practice, selling dental supplies into over 1,000 dental practices, and they get acquired by a large X-ray company, and that X-ray company sees the opportunity to have easy, warm access to 1,000 more dental practices, and if all they sell is a handful of machines, they recoup their investment in buying your business. So you have to understand. So there's the strategic buyer scenario where there's a lot of value for them to buy your business right off the bat, way beyond the financial numbers. And so those are the things we look for. And so when we take a deep dive and review a business, we're looking for those, looking for the gold, looking for the unique angle to your business where you've got a unique product, service, market, location, something that's going to add some extra value, and then try to find the best potential buyer who's going to appreciate that extra value and therefore give you that strategic buyer, which will put a big smile on your face, much more than a financial buyer will. But also realistically set expectations that the majority of buyers are financial buyers, and so there are limits as to what they'll reasonably pay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good differentiate or difference between financial and strategic. I think a lot of people don't take those two into account. They're just thinking that everybody's sort of strategic as to like who they're when they're coming to conversations and everything, and it's just not the reality. Everybody's looking at this as a vehicle to make a return, and I think with the amount of roll ups out there now, it's becoming very very normal. I think much more normal than it used to be in terms of like private equity, meaning it was a huge organization, and now they're like teams of a couple people doing analysis on marketplaces like Flippa and trying to really get in there themselves. And I think it's a unique position. I think with that said, when it comes to the realities, let's talk about mistakes. This is always my favorite topic because this is where the knowledge really comes from. For people listening that are operating a business right now, they're in the trenches doing it. What can you share around the mistakes that you've seen happen throughout this process?
Um, one of the biggest that I see happen all too frequently is the unsolicited offer.
Mm.
And in my book, Exit Like a Winner, I have a chapter called The Steak Dinner. And in there, I tell a story about a couple who's selling a medical equipment company, and they're approached by a potential buyer unsolicited, how great their company is. All they want to do is have a casual meal with them, maybe talk about the opportunity. And so next thing you know, they're sitting at Burn's Steakhouse being told how great their company is. And so they're thinking, wow, maybe I can sell my company. I can keep it confidential because I haven't had to go to market. I haven't told anybody else I'm selling it. It'll be easy peasy. There's only one buyer involved, and so it can look attractive from the outside. And oh, I may not even need help of a M&A advisor because I can maybe handle this myself with just an attorney to handle some of the legal documents. And so oftentimes that ends up being a huge mistake because the strategic buyer has bought maybe 100 companies, maybe 500. And how many companies have you sold? And in most cases, it's the one and only, and you haven't done it yet, or maybe you've done a couple if you're a serial entrepreneur. And so, who has the advantage in going into that conversation? And then once you're tied up in a letter of intent with an ability to market it to other people, now you really don't know what the market value is of your business, nor can you solicit others. And now you're investing a lot of time and energy. And so I've seen that mistake happen many, many times. And that's the exact reason why strategic buyers try to approach you directly, is because if I can get you before you're prepared to sell, when you don't know the value of your business, when you're not being represented, I may be able to get the best deal possible in doing that acquisition. That's what's on their mind, and they certainly have the advantages of experience, and it works for them, and the perceived advantages for you, you really are outweighed by the amount of money and the terms that you're going to lose on when the deal is done.
Hmm. And I have found that a lot of the mistakes that I hear about are, the whining and dining does happen with the unsolicited offers for sure. I've heard a lot of that, but often working with attorneys that aren't necessarily, focused in the field of M&A. And I think
Yes.
that this is one that I hear probably the most frequent,
Yeah.
and that, there's a whoopsie
Yeah.
after it's done.
Yes.
And it's kind of like having, a instead of having a brain surgeon come in and do your brain surgery, you just have like a dentist coming
Yes.
in and
You're a
doing,
doctor,
yeah,
wrong
yeah,
kind of doctor, but
yeah, wrong kind of doctor, but you got it, the DR in front of your name, so that should work on my brain. So I think there's a lot of big potholes that people run into
yes.
throughout the whole process. And I think that it's really good to know that having somebody in your corner instead of doing the unsolicited route, I
Yeah.
think is a great takeaway for
That
sure.
is one of the things that got me involved in what I do, and promoted me to, drove me to write my book, because I knew that I couldn't personally work with every entrepreneur out there. And so I wrote Exit Like a Winner because across the country there's entrepreneurs that need help, and there's these mistakes that keep repeating, and because they're one and done with selling their business. And typically for an entrepreneur, you have a strong, self-confidence in what you can do. You've bootstrapped it up. You've built this company from nothing to 50 people, 100 people, whatever it might be. And so that strength can be a flaw when it comes time to sell, because you're like, oh, I can do this myself too. And you walk right off the cliff. And what often happens in the story that is never told, or rarely told, is most entrepreneurs, when they've sold their company, um, and someone asks them how did it go, they're going to say, it went great. I sold my company. Awesome. They're not going to say, I figured out 6 months after I sold it that I left $3 million on the table, and that I made these mistakes, because why would you want to like tell your peer group, your friends, your family, everybody, that you kind of made a big mistake and you're kind of foolish? You're just going to say, yeah, I successfully sold my company, and you're just going to suck it up, even though you know it didn't go well, because that's not a story you want to repeat, or have people look at you and you want to feel like you were taken. So it's not a story that often gets told, and so therefore other entrepreneurs who are selling their company for that one and done don't hear the stories often enough, aren't aware of how often it doesn't go well for them selling it by themselves, being represented by maybe their accountant, and their accountant and or their attorney may not be an M&A attorney, may not know the business valuation, which I often see. In fact, there was one in St. Petersburg, a tragic story that happened about a dozen years ago, where a gentleman had a very successful actuarial company, and he sold it, and he ended up dying from an illness that he had for 2 years, and he never put in a plan to get an M&A advisor. So he trusted his attorney, who had done his legal paperwork for many years, and his accountant had done his taxes for many years to sell his company if something should happen. And so his wife was left with that, and they ended up selling it for 1/7 of what it was worth. There's more details I share in my book, but it was a really bad scenario, and it was made me so angry personally, because his net worth was given to a key employee who became an overnight millionaire, and his wife and children and grandchildren and legacy were just squandered.
Mm, wow. Yeah. What a brutal lesson, for sure. And I think planning definitely is something that's not spoken about enough. So I think when it comes to timing, that one is obviously like a pretty radical example of an accident, or a
Yeah.
death that happened. But let's talk about when the right time to exit is, because this is a very frequently asked question. It's kind of an unknown because everybody's different. Every chapter in their life is different. But what have you seen over the years in terms of timing, and what can you share for tips?
Yes, on timing. One of the things that I think is really helpful to do is, I have an exercise called the hourglass grid, and you go through this exercise, and you basically go over your life span, and an average male lives to 78, average female to 80, and you go through the grid and you look at where you're at, how much time you have left, and if you look at the time you have left, 1/3 of that you'll spend sleeping, and so you narrow, and then you have to narrow down. Well, that's if I'm going to live till 78, am I going to be in good health, fully functional till 78? Or am I going to be compromised? So how many good years do I have where I really have my health and I can travel, I can do things, I'm going to be very active? And then you look at that number, and so it helps you back into that, and that gives you a really good understanding of how much runway you have left, and that's a great place to start, because all of us like to live in the sea of denial, and we're not talking about Egypt. That we all like to, believe we're going to kind of live forever, and there's always a brighter tomorrow. But it's when you go through this exercise, it helps you get very sober about how many Christmases you have left, right? So it helps you get very clear on that, and that can help you make a lucid decision on your company, and when's the right timing for you. In addition to that, there are things you can do preemptively to make sure your company is ready to sell. So what I often say to my clients that I'm representing and we're going to market is, I want you to, run this company as if you're going to keep it for 10 more years. In the meantime, I'll be working hard and confidentially to find the best buyer for your company. And when I do, it'll be a nice surprise and go time for you, and then we'll get it sold for you and you'll cash out. But until then, think long term and run it. So you have to carry the two thoughts in your mind. I'm willing to sell tomorrow, but I'm playing the long game as if I'm going to be here for a long time. And so if you do both at once, it increases your odds of a successful sale. And then some of the things you would do certainly are developing standard operating procedures in your business. So think of your business as a franchise, even if it's not. And so, do I have an SOP manual? Do I have everything clearly delineated? Do I have a reasonably decent accounting system? Don't upgrade. I've seen QuickBooks running, $40 million businesses successfully, and maybe you need to upgrade your accounting software. Maybe you don't, but don't overinvest in that, because a buyer is not going to pay you a premium because you've upgraded it to a more sophisticated accounting software necessarily. So
Hmm.
be careful about where you invest the money. And when you do come to sell, never surprise the buyer. They're going to have due diligence and they're allowed to look at every aspect of your business, and don't surprise them. Better disclose any lawsuits, any outstanding issues you have, and be as forward as you can, because the fewer surprises, the higher the trust.
Hmm. Fewer surprises, higher the trust. Love that. Love that. So I think that's kind of a good segue before we get to the finale question. I guess when it comes to, seriously considering the exit, I think that there's hesitation. Like a lot of people hesitate. A lot of people are, getting cold feet, and there's signals. And, of course, we were talking about interest rates earlier and the timing and everything. I guess with your experience and everybody that you've talked to, what indicate when you should start getting serious about it? Because I know we just mentioned timing, but like there could be some indicators that come your way while you're operating that say like, oh, actually this needs to happen. Like I need to make a move.
Certainly, as far as you mean what's going on and maybe in your industry or within your business, that may be indicators of maybe time to exit or consider it. I think some of it's going to drive around your industry as well. You'll have an intimate understanding of your industry, and there are some dying industries. They just are. For example, there'll certainly always be a place for a limited amount of dry cleaning, but the way the clothes are being manufactured, the casual dress that most people are wearing as opposed to business suits, et cetera, et cetera, there's less and less overall demand. And so some industries are just out of favor. And you can build a $5 million dry cleaning business and a $5 million IT managed service company, and guess which one is going to sell for a much greater multiple, right? So the industry matters. You can work very hard. You could be very smart, but if you're in the unfavorable industry or your industry is in decline, there may be a reason to exit sooner than later. I've also noticed a trend of fewer. There's been fewer entrepreneurs. There's been a big message to go to college, work for corporate America, et cetera, et cetera. And so you don't see as many entrepreneurs that are in the marketplace as there were even 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Mm.
So less entrepreneurs means you have fewer options to sell. So you have to be more strategic and more planful so that your business does sell when you're ready to exit, and you're not left there either winding down your business or some compromised sale to an employee who has no money, and that your payout's going to be over the next 10 or 20 years, which puts a lot of risk on you, that whether they'll, business will stay viable, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm. Nice. Okay. So that takes us to the finale. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell Edward 10 years ago?
Hmm. In what context?
Like knowing everything that you know about
Yeah,
exits,
yeah,
everybody that you've seen go through the process,
yeah.
what would you tell yourself?
Well, recurring revenue is the holy grail, obviously. Uh, Planning on a business that you can scale. Also, looking at the customer acquisition costs and making sure you have something that you can replicate and build momentum on. You want to be in a situation where, for example, I've dealt with some wonderful companies, but they do project work, and so electrical contractor, for example, that every 6 months their projects are dead, and so it's a new start on a new project, so they can never build momentum. On the other case, a company that supplies generators, to hospitals and the government and other large industrial applications under long-term contracts. And so once I sell you that generator, I can sell someone else a generator. Next week I have 2 generators sold. Next week I have 50 generators sold. So you have the multiplying effect. You see that in financial services and asset gathering. So if I over time can have 50 wealthy clients, I've developed a whole pool of assets I can manage. If I'm only providing them a service, a one-off service, I have to keep reinventing myself every 3 months or 6 months or whatever that sales cycle is.
Hmm.
So find places where you can build momentum.
Got it. Well said. So that takes us to your book. Just give us a high level as to what's the book about and where people can learn more about it.
Yeah, I wrote a book 2 years ago called Exit Like a Winner: The Proven Success Formula for Selling Your Business. And it's out in the book and it's out in Audible as well if you prefer to listen. And it's really unique in the business book world in that it's intellectual, but it's also emotional and it's also kind of raw and hard hitting. And so I have picked up books on M&A and business sales that were like reading a dictionary, and it was like just shoot me now. It's like reading a book on how to remove your own kidney, and it wasn't pleasant at all. This book is focused on the bigger issues, the emotional aspects, the strategic aspects, the best advice that I've condensed over my career as far as what you need to do and what you need to watch out for. And also, so it helps you decide whether now's the time to sell, and if you go about it, what pitfalls to work for, and what kind of help you need. Do you need a business broker? Do you need an M&A advisor? Do you need an investment banker? What's right for you and your business and your situation? So I address all those issues, and it helps you move the ball forward successfully and what's best for you so that you can maximize it. I like to call it harvesting the wealth. Most entrepreneurs don't have a pension. They don't work for a large organization. There's no one going to be paying them once their cash flow stops when they sell the company. So they need to be successfully harvesting the wealth, and this book will help guide you through that.
Very nice. Very nice. Those are all the questions that I have for you. And where can people learn more about the book?
The book is available, Exit Like a Winner, on Amazon as well as on Audible. And also my number is 800-975-2114. And my email, you can send an email to info@edisonavenue.com. And if you do, I can send you a checklist on due diligence that can be very helpful as you start to prepare your company to sell in the future and things you need to be looking out for. Again, that's info@edisonavenue.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, wherever you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, links that Edward mentioned will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation, Steve.